Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, Spain. Good afternoon, Holland, Germany, United Kingdom, the United States of America, and of course, if there is still something left, my beloved country, Chile. It is very pleasant. Where should I press here? Sorry. Here. That's it. It is very pleasant to feel the cold again, since I come from extreme heat waves, not precisely because of global warming. And I'm also surprised to see you all here in Spain still alive. Are you all feeling well? I ask you this because in 2006, Prophet Al Gore said this: humanity is sitting on a time bomb. If scientists are, well, I'm not going through all this horror story that is about the end of planet Earth in 10 years because you have a car, because you use electricity that will burn us all. It's large, hysterical, and fake. So if you must, you may read it later in internet. However, sorry, I went too fast. That's it. However, in what was Mr. Visionary based on, as well as the UN IPCC, to predict the end of times? In the case of the IPCC, 31 years have passed and the planet still refuses coming to an end. They do futurology with this kind of pseudoscience. In the first place, we have the famous Michael Mann's hockey stick. Is there something wrong about it? Apart of everything else, they chopped medieval warm period's head off. And what then really happened? Well, there you have its head back in place. In the second place, we have, for example, these are only examples, the famous NASA NOAA global temperature rise specially cooked for the Paris COP31. I want to ask you to lean your necks in order to interpret this graph properly. I will do it for you. That's the way you should read it. And what did they do? Something for which they die for: adjustments. They came up with a process called data homogenization. Anthony already explained that fantastically, that always tunes the result at higher temperatures. NOAA cooled ocean surface temperatures data prior to 1998 through adjustments to its extended reconstructed sea surface temperature models to show an increase after that year. And here you can see a difference. That's one, and here's another. Also, you can watch it here. There you have NASA above and below the satellite records. And finally, we have this spaghetti consisting in 73 IPCC prediction models versus satellite and weather balloon data, the green and blue spots below. The above all bias temperature rise as functions only of man-made CO2 emissions have induced most governments to drive forceful measures to reduce greenhouse gases, which have severely hit their economies. Let's see the common consequences to those climate policies, starting by, of course, bureaucracies, implying more government departments and environmental agencies, with many of them supra-congressional powers. If I'm not wrong, a good example of it is the EPA. In the case of Chile, between 2006 and 2010, ministries of energy, environment, and a superintendence of environment were formed. Regulations that have extended to clean energy sources like nuclear and hydraulic. Taxes, fixed, cap and trade, carbon tax, fuel tax, cow-F tax, and other green beauties. Except for cap and trade and cow-F tax in Chile, which will surely come, Chile is covered by the rest, fully covered by the rest. None of the three above, of course, have ever produced a single watt hour. government subsidies, and the vicious circle with more taxes to finance them. Huge increase in energy cost, therefore in everything else. Electricity supply instability, and the need of gas coal backup stations running inefficiently in parallel to offset natural intermittence, meaning more subsidies, taxes, and electricity price increase. Wind and solar sources in Chile don't have such plants, where backups are the grid itself, something unfeasible for stability. Negative consequences for their economies, such as loss of competitiveness, severe decline in economic growth, abrupt investment break, capital flight and industrial exodus, increasing cost of living, reduction in purchasing power and consumer surplus, unemployment, wealth poverty gap increase in its vicious part, where the poor get even poorer. Environmental damage, such as massive bird and bat killing, huge land use, and neodymium mining with its inherent radioactive waste. School political indoctrination or brainwashing, always with guilt, fear, and development contempt feelings. Loss of degrees of freedom or sovereignty. And all for what? For nothing. No decline in greenhouse gases emissions and no impact on global warming whatsoever. As Bjorn Lomborg tries to prove in his peer-reviewed paper, using the same exaggerated UN numbers and models, this one is called MAGIC, Climate Standard Model, Lomborg concluded that if the world fulfills its commitment to the Paris Accord from the early 2000s and keeps it after 2030, global warming will have been avoided by 0.17 degrees Celsius. But you should divide that number by 3, as Lord Monckton has proven with its feedback analysis. And that is all. We will now see if Chile and climate policies have behaved consistently in its effort to achieve poverty. Let's first take an economy overview of Chile over the last third of a century in 3 simple variables: economic growth, tax on profits, and competitiveness. Since 1990, tax on profits never stopped increasing while economic growth never stopped declining, as well as competitiveness. And as always happens, economic growth goes hand in hand with the kind of government any country may have. However, the 90s were still prosperous years for Chile, recognized even by President Clinton during his visit in 1998 when he said, "Chile is the most precious jewel of the Latin American crown." Those times are gone. In that period, Spain invested in big, becoming an important participant in sectors such as telecommunications, Telefónica de Chile, waters, Aguas Andina, banking, Banco Santander, urban highways, Costanera Norte, power generation, Endesa España, you will see later Endesa España, and 50% of the national electrical distribution through Compañía General de Electricidad, and that is today. So now let's go and see climate change and energy in Chile, the cuddly toy to the UN. Why is this? For its outstanding climate action behavior, for which Bachelet was gifted with the Champions of the Earth Prize in 2017. What an honor. Following, I will show, as one of the best examples, how things should be carried out in order to achieve both a global warming ghost and an entire economy go away. So please don't follow Chile. Chile has a large hydroelectric potential that would satisfy the annual electricity demand by more than 100%. Currently, it only uses 29% of that potential and contributes also only with 29% of the total electricity generation. With a peak of 100% of hydroelectric generation in 1991, today it has dropped to 29%. So currently, generation strongly relies on fossil fuels, yet both sources have been aggressively attacked at least in the last 12 years. We'll see some examples now. After 3 years of bureaucracies and having passed all environmental requirements, in 2010, Barrancones coal-fired project of 540 megawatts and an investment of $1.1 billion was finally canceled by President Piñera. In 2009, started the world's by far most efficient hydroelectric project, Hidroaicén, in the far south of Chile, of 2.75 gigawatts and an investment of $3.2 billion. After 7 years and having spent $250 million in bureaucracies and trials, in 2016 was finally repealed by Bachelet. If it had been built since 2018, that single plant would represent today more than 45% of the national hydroelectric generation, and more than 55% of the entire generation would come from hydroelectricity, the cheapest, the cleanest, the most stable, and for Chile the most abundant. That year, Bachelet announced the construction of 2 power plants, wind and solar, to supply 76% of Santiago's subway electricity, both of 295 megawatts, at a cost of $680 billion. She said, a pioneering project in the entire world. She was right, because I don't know of any other country in planet Earth having done such nonsense. Electricity costs for the subway rose 210%, from 47.6 to $100 per megawatt hour. In 2020, a solar power plant, Cerro Dominador, in the far north of Chile, Cerro Dominador of 210 megawatts will start operations at a cost of $1.4 billion. Only its thermosolar fraction of 110 covers a surface almost 160 times greater than a combined cycle power plant of the same capacity. And I would like to show this to my friends of Spain. And we will, for a moment, imagine we place this wonderful tower right between your beautiful Cuatro Torres, 4 towers. It would look just like this, in a perfect scale. To supply only 1.13% of Madrid's energy and 0.16% of the whole country. In short, let's see this on a map. It would also take 2 of your highways, and that little spot there is equivalent of the same capacity coal gas combined cycle power station. You can see a difference in land use. In short, these renewable sources have meant an average investment cost 11 times higher than that of traditional sources in the cases I showed to you. Notice the difference between Hidroaicén and Cerro Dominador. In this case, you have to multiply 25 times. In 2017, Bachelet announced 96 new taxes and regulations for her so-called National Action Plan on Climate Change. But President Piñera went further and announced his Chilean energy path, consisting in 11 mega commitments, including the decarbonization of the economy, which implies the closure of 20% of coal generation in the next 5 years, and by 2040, now 2030, that's new, the rest. And a climate change frame law, of course, with 7 additional bureaucracies. In the 2019 Nations account last June, he announced that during COP25, which Chile is chairing right now, will require the UN to ask the world to be more aggressive to reduce CO2 emissions and call children to help him to engage their parents with the noble cause of saving the environment. And also announced Chile becoming a neutral emitting country by 2030. For his purpose, 3 days before riots in Chile began, he declared a new commitment to increase greenhouse gases reductions from 30% committed in the Paris Agreement by Bachelet to 45% in both cases, Chile would become a world pioneer if such a regressive goal is ever achieved. Finally, he declared Chile as one of the 10 most vulnerable countries in the planet to the climate change threat. And what is Chile vulnerable to? That 5 cities that are currently 10 meters above sea level will go under the Pacific Ocean by 2100 because the seas will rise 12 to 13 times faster than during the last deglaciation, when, for example, Chicago was buried under 900 meters of ice and Montreal under 3,300 meters. Today, there's simply no ice on Earth for that prediction becoming remotely true. The absurd then is evident. All this openly shows what Chile is up for, and that is why by 2018 became the fifth most expensive country in industrial electricity and 11th in domestic electricity among OECD nations, and for both the most expensive in South America. Notice that above Chile in the list all are developed countries, and also almost all of them beneath. Until July this year, electricity had risen above 20%, leaving Chile most likely in places third and eighth, respectively. And that is what anyone could call what an achievement. See the high correlation between electricity prices and installed renewable capacity per capita in Europe. If Chile was an European nation, it would be in this point of the graph. Most expensive for its comparative low installed renewable capacity. Therefore, it doesn't make any sense for Chile to impose, nor to Spain, of course, to impose any climate policy, even if man-made global warming's theory was true, which is not, since countries that represent almost 60% of global CO2 emissions are in fact out of the Paris Accord, therefore free to emit whatever they want, whatever they like, while Chile only accounts for 0.25% of total emissions. And Spain is right between Chile and China, in the middle. So let's see now what have been Chile's achievements to save the planet. While still increasing its CO2 emissions in the last decade, it's still declining its economic growth, but with an astonishing, unbelievable, incredible contribution to forestall global warming of this amount, with all feedbacks included, 0.000115 degrees Celsius per decade, but still contributes to global warming. Would you like to see what's going on with Spain? Here we have Spain. Well, we will split this graph in two parts because indeed in the first 5 years, Spain was decreasing its CO2 emissions, while in the second 5 years started to increase them again. And why was that? Well, because in the first 5 years, Spain had a negative economic growth. But yes, Spain is contributing to forestall global warming in this amount, 0.0003 degrees Celsius per decade. So congratulations, Spain, you are saving the planet. Al Gore should be very happy with you. In this very moment, Chile is chairing the Global Bureaucracy Annual Party, also known as Conference of the Parties, to stop an imaginary man-made global warming, while its government hasn't even been able to stop its own local warming. For in fact, in Chile, the rule of law, public force, and a government no longer exist after an unconditional surrender to the extreme left. Climate change is a Trojan horse of socialism, totalitarian ideology that Chile was the first country in the world to adopt in democracy and the first country in the world to get rid of that scourge. What you will see next is neither a result of global warming nor an expensive subsidized Tesla vehicle that burned its battery, as often happens. It's a little more dramatic than that. Today, Sorry, I don't like what I'm going to show. Can I have a bit of water? Excuse me. I was thinking about doing this or not. Here I go. Today, the forces of evil have returned violently. And what is happening in Chile is not a social explosion, but an anti-social explosion, an ongoing communist revolution, which took as a pretext the sustained electricity, metro, and transport fare hikes derived from the overturn from traditional electric generation to medieval energy sources, and a holy war against fossil fuels. It is true that these redeeming measures have caused an enormous citizen outrage, especially among the poorest. But the wick that detonated the antisocial bomb was lit by the extreme left that then proceeded, along with vandalism. Something happened here. I did everything. Wait a moment. I will go quickly here. Here we go. Okay, that's it. I'll go again. The ideology of man-made global warming undoubtedly, no. Today, the forces of evil have returned violently, and what is happening in Chile is not a social explosion, but an anti-social explosion, an ongoing communist revolution, which took as a pretext the sustained electricity, metro, and transport fare hikes derived from the overturn from traditional electric generation to medieval energy sources, and a holy war against fossil fuels. Is it true? It is true that these redeeming measures have caused an enormous citizen outrage, especially among the poorest. But the wick that detonated the antisocial bomb was lit by the extreme left that then proceeded, along with vandalism, plundering, mindless destruction, and crime, to an out-of-control devastation. That was your building, Spain. The ideology of man-made global warming undoubtedly represents evil. But for our hope, evil has always been a minority, perhaps because man, as all creatures of God, wants to live, wants to be free, wants to thrive, and above all, wants to love. I will now end citing an 18th century quote of the father of the British conservative liberalism, Edmund Burke. It goes like this: "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." And in Chile, while good men seem to have buried their heads in the sand like ostriches, nothing has been done. Nothing but to encourage hatred and chaos. Muchas gracias. Feliz Navidad, España, y espero que puedan tener ustedes un próspero año nuevo.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel and consider donating to the Heartland Institute to support more vibrant free markets, greater individual liberties, and more videos like this one.